Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone. Welcome to our 10th talk on studies in Indonesia. This event is co-organized by the International Qur'anic Studies Association and the Indonesian Association of the Quranic and if you missed our exciting talks, the Global Qur'an had made them accessible online on its YouTube channel. Well, I am now delighted to welcome our speaker today, Lien Iffah Naf'atu Fina, a former lecturer at Sunan Kalijaga Islamic State University in Yogyakarta. She obtained her master from Harvard Seminary's Graduate Theological and Religious Program, and she is currently now pursuing her PhD in Chicago. She had translated several English books into Bahasa Indonesia and written some journal articles, one being her latest review on Majid Daneshkar, Studying the Quran in the Muslim Academy, published by Brill. Her other writings cover both modern and classical periods. She once worked on Angelica Nuwit and Abdullah Said's approaches to the Quranic text, and at the same time she had been working on mystical theological thought in classical medieval Islam. So today, I think she will talk about the fourth century defender of the Ash'ari theology, Al-Bāqillānī, particularly on his defense of the miraculousness of the Quran. So, but Lien, I think the audience cannot wait any longer to hear your presentation. Really a part of your thesis, if I understood correctly. So please, time is yours.
Thank you, Muammar. Let me share screen right now. Can everyone see it? Okay.
Not yet. Yes.
Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present a part of my research that I conducted around 4 years ago. I have not presented this research, nor have I published it. Therefore, I'm very much looking forward to your feedback and comment to help refine the argument that I'm trying to make here. We have among the audience at least 2 scholars who have dealt with the subject of this paper and whose work I also quote. Pak Yusuf Rahman, one of our speakers, has published on I'jazul Qur'an, especially Qadi Abdul Jabbar's poetry, Qadi Abdul Jabbar's theory on I'jazul Qur'an, and Pak David Visanov has treated Al-Bāqillānī's hermeneutics or usul fiqh in his book. So I'm studying a treatise by Al-Bāqillānī, Kitāb al-Bayān, in which he develops a theory of mu'jizah or prophetic miracles and its differentiation from other extraordinary phenomena. And the full title is Kitāb al-Bayān al-Farq bain al-mu'jizat wal-karamat wal-hiyal wal-kihanah wal-sihr wal-naranjat. In comparison to his other book, I'jazul Qur'an, Kitāb al-Bayān is more theoretical. It treats the nature of miracles as its foundational concept. Therefore, the treatise addresses the miracles of prophets in general, not only that of Muhammad. There had been other theoretical writings on miracles produced by the Mu'tazilis, the first Muslim theologians, but the originality of this treatise lies in its being a theological work which discusses the distinction of miracles from magic, divination, and other phenomena, while at the same time defending magic's existence. The treatise is divided into 12 chapters, at least, but not all chapters we have in the manuscript that comes to us, including the author's introduction. So 12 chapters, including the author's introduction. In Kitāb al-Bayān, among many other extraordinary phenomena referred in the title, Al-Bāqillānī spent many pages to defend and justify the reality of magic, marked in red. from 6 until 8. Therefore, the question of the paper is why, in constructing his theory of prophetic miracles, Al-Bāqillānī dedicated a long chapter to justify the reality of magic, when by doing so, he had to construct a theory that distinguishes prophetic miracles from magic. In contrast, other groups, most prominently in the Mu'tazilis, argued that it would be easier to defend miracles if one denied the reality of magic. Indeed, in this treatise, Al-Bāqillānī explicitly stated that he defended the reality of magic against the Mu'tazilis, who, in order to save miracles, denied its reality. However, this paper aims to elucidate the underlying motives of Al-Bāqillānī's thought in connection to his theory of the Qur'an. I argue that in addition to defending the Ash'ari theology against the Mu'tazilis, his defending the reality of magic is ultimately to support his theory of I'jazul Qur'an, or the miraculousness of the Qur'an. Even though the discussion of the Qur'an is not explicit in the treatise, Al-Bāqillānī's theory of miracles in relation to magic was structured to bolster his particular understanding of Qur'an's excellence, and I argue that one cannot fully grasp his project with regard to the former without having the contextualization of the latter. Through a close analysis of Al-Bāqillānī's theory of miracles, it will also be shown that the concern to elevate the miraculousness of the Qur'an amidst assertions of the superiority of previous prophetic miracles significantly informs how Al-Bāqillānī structures, defines, and circumscribes various kinds of extraordinary phenomena. As for the importance of this paper, the study of Al-Bāqillānī's doctrine of miracles is central to scholarship because none of the surviving works of Al-Ash'ari includes any discussion of prophethood. Al-Bāqillānī's theory on the subject becomes the doorway to understand Ash'arism's early take on the issue. So who is Al-Bāqillānī? Al-Bāqillānī lives during a vibrant conversation on prophethood and mu'jizah. Abu Bakr al-Bāqillānī was the first important Ash'ari theologian whose work have survived in quantity. He lived during the 4th or 10th century. Little is known about his personal life, but he was born and raised in Basra and spent most of his life in Baghdad and died there in 1013. He learned theology from the second major student of Al-Ash'ari and adhered to the Maliki school of law. He wrote around 52 voluminous books encompassing a wide range of subjects in Islamic studies, from theology, in defense of orthodoxy and Sunni Islam, to jurisprudence, to pieces answering the questions of people from all over the Muslim world. He was a popular teacher, a qadi, and was known to be the sheikh of the Sunnah. During his lifetime, Mu'tazilism was still quite prominent and influential in the scheme of Muslim societies, whereas Ash'arism was in the process of establishing itself. Al-Bāqillānī lives during a vibrant conversation on prophethood and mu'jizah. There are several backgrounds that gives rise to this conversation. These are, as Islam spread, Muslims encounter other religious traditions and ask about the very foundation of their beliefs, that is the prophethood of Muhammad. At this time, mu'jizah becomes standard criterion shared by Jews, Christians, and Muslims as proofs for a veracity of beliefs. Muslim theologians develop a theory to respond to this challenge. They agreed on the necessity of prophetic miracles as evidence for true prophethood, and in this case, the Qur'an was established as Muhammad's miracle. Also, there was Shu'abi sentiment among Arabs versus non-Arabs, and the rise of free thinkers who tried to compose imitations of the Qur'an, and as a response, scholars developed the theories of I'jazul Qur'an. In response, theologians agreed that the Qur'an is the ultimate proof for Muhammad's prophethood, but they disagree on what grounds the Qur'an is miracle. Ibrahim an-Nazam stated that it is because the Arabs couldn't match the Qur'an. The miraculousness lies in God's preventing others from imitating it. This theory, called Sarfah, becomes the doctrine of Baghdadi theologians. And the second response is from Abu Uthman al-Jahil, an-Nazam students, who came up with a different theory, and he noted that the Baghdadi theologians, the Baghdadi Mu'tazilis, theory implies that the miraculousness of the Quran doesn't lie in the Quran itself. So correcting that error, he stated that its miraculousness lies in its eloquence or fasahah. This theory was taken up by the Bashran Mu'tazilis, including Qadi Abdul Jabbar, Al-Bāqillānī's contemporary. Al-Bāqillānī engaged in the already established discussion. He disagreed with the two groups and set out different theory. As scholars argue, Al-Bāqillānī found the miraculousness of the Quran in its content, style, and composition, or nazm. Sophia Fasalau argues that to Al-Bāqillānī, the miraculousness of the Quran lies in that its style is beyond the existing genre. It defies classification. The Quran is not poetry, sajah, prose, etc. And second is that the level of the Quran's eloquence is consistent despite the many themes it deals with. Another scholar, Rachel Friedman, further accused that I'jazul Qur'an, Al-Bāqillānī, that in his Kitāb I'jazul Qur'an, Al-Bāqillānī does not merely recites the Quran's miraculousness in its nazm or ta'lif itself, but in a situation in which its nazm is used to express meaning or ideas in the clearest way. It is to be noted that even though Al-Bāqillānī emphasized the ultimate stylistic accomplishments of the Quran, which are matchless and inimitable, he didn't suggest that the miraculousness of the Quran ultimately resides in this material aspect. The Quran reaches that achievement only because it comes from God. This concept is extremely important to Al-Bāqillānī's theory of miracles in Kitāb al-Bayān, as we will see below. During Al-Bāqillānī's lifetime, there are three phenomena. The first is the rise of the Shi'is, particularly in the Ismailis. Some of them perform extraordinary things to attract followers. The development of Sufism and the ability of some Sufis to perform miracles or karamah. The flowering of certain philosophical thought, which sometimes denied the very prophethood of Muhammad, and the existential possibility of miracles. In light of this, there are two possible explanations for the background behind the writing of Kitāb al-Bayān. First, Al-Bāqillānī was very concerned about the development of public belief in wondrous events and the resulting confusion about the validity of miracles. For example, in Al-Bayān, he mentioned several names who were well known for extraordinary performances, known as karamah, sihr, or others. These figures are Al-Hallaj, Ibn Hilal, Al-Jannabi, Al-Qarmati, for example. And second, there is a need for an adequate theological explanation of the ontological reality of miracles and magic from an Ash'ari viewpoint. Al-Bāqillānī opposed Mu'tazili's response because they apparently denied the reality of saintly miracles and magic, regarding them as mere trickery and legerdemain, all in order to defend the validity of miracles. In short, Al-Bāqillānī wrote Kitāb al-Bayān as a response addressing the existing confusion about miracles and magic and to refute the Mu'tazilis' response to that situation. So Mu'tazilis, in terms of whether sihr has a reality or not, Mu'tazilis' metaphysics and cosmology disallowed magic. The interruption of adah or custom or the natural order of things carried an epistemological significance. Therefore, it could occur only due to an extremely important event, that is to signify a prophet's veracity. According to them, the sign of prophethood should be clearly distinct from other signs. Therefore, according to them, the extraordinary events performed by imams, saints, diviners, magicians, and claimants to prophethood are mere trickery. Al-Bāqillānī, in contrast, asserted that magic has an ontological reality on three bases. The first is Qur'an, Surat Al-Baqarah, verse 102. For the Mu'tazilis, accepting the reality of magic based on this first will be difficult to explain God's justice. If magic is something that God allows to happen, it contradicts the impossibility that God does evil. It also contradicts the doctrine of humans' accountability. In their theory, humans have free choice or ikhtiyar and inherent power over their own actions for which they are counted responsible. In order for humans' reason to discover what is good and evil, there has to be a consistent mechanical system of nature. Objective ethics requires objective nature. Accepting the reality of magic contradicts this prerequisite. Therefore, Mu'tazilis interpret sihr here as mere trickery. It doesn't have a reality. The second basis that Al-Bāqillānī uses to accept magic is that there are traditions or athar that report the practice of magic during the time of the Prophet, his companion, and the generations after the companions. While the third is that the fact that earlier jurists dealt with the issues concerning the punishment of the magicians. While the Mu'tazilis asserted that magic is nothing but trickery, accepting the reality of magic makes more sense within the logic of Ash'ari theology. The Ash'ari subjective ethics allows that God affects magic. In Ash'ari's absolute occasionalism, there is no law determining and constraining God's way of acting, and there is no fixed mechanical system in the working of nature. Thus, magic is not theoretically impossible in this worldview, in which God can allow any breaking of custom at any moment. Now, if magic has reality, how can you distinguish between magicians and prophets? Al-Bāqillānī was asked that question. To respond to this question, in Kitāb al-Bayān, Al-Bāqillānī presented several hypothetical cases and analyzed them using the lens of his theological doctrine of miracles. In other words, in order to lay out the distinction between prophets and magicians, he delved into speculative theological and theoretical discussion, not empirical and historical proofs. But before outlining Al-Bāqillānī's theory or speculative cases, it is necessary to revisit the concept of the nature of miracles, which also serves as the conditions required for true miracles. This will be extremely important in later analysis because to Al-Bāqillānī, a miracle is only a miracle if it meets the conditions. It is to be noted that Al-Bāqillānī borrowed this from the Mu'tazilis, his predecessors. So the nature of miracles is that it will not be such unless it takes place by the action of God, in a degree breaking the custom of man, and is accompanied by the challenging of a prophet to others to produce something similar, and rebukes his adversary for being incapable of producing it. It is also important to be informed of Al-Bāqillānī's categorization of miracles, which he also borrows from the Mu'tazilis. So there are two types of miracles whose character of breaking custom is different. The first is the absolute miracles. That is something over which God alone has power. For example, only God can create bodies, qualities, and life. Miracles of Moses and Jesus belong to this kind. The second mode of miracles are called modal miracles. They involved miracles that fall under the power of creatures. The second mode of miracle consists in two types. The first is that which includes ordinary events or ordinary actions. So its miraculousness doesn't lie in its genus, unlike the first one. An ordinary action can be a miracle when it meets the four requirements above. In this case, when a prophet challenges to create its like, God will prevent them from doing it, even though customarily they are able to do it. The breaking of custom lies in their inability. And the second type of the second category of miracle is that God's affecting an extraordinary amount of something which can be done by creatures in ordinary and limited amounts. Here, the miraculousness lies in God's empowering the prophets to produce an unaccustomed quantity. The breaking of custom lies in this unaccustomed quantity. Unlike the miracles of Moses and Jesus, this miracle is not a miracle by genus or in themselves. Their miraculousness lies in the way the creation is affected and the action is affected, and this effect can be conducted only by God. Examples of the second type of miracles are moving mountains. The moving of mountains belong to a category of action that man can theoretically accomplish, but it is unattainable due to the degree of difficulty. This dual categorization was most likely formulated to include the Qur'an as a kind of miracle. returning to the earlier question, if magic has a reality, how can you distinguish between magicians and prophets? Again, in responding to this task, Al-Bāqillānī presented several hypothetical cases and analyzed them using the lens of his theological doctrine of miracles. So the case number one, when someone uses trickery as his proof for a prophethood, in this case, again, the miracles are phenomenon over which only God has power, and trickery is, in contrast, under the locus of human power. So it's easy to resolve. It's not miracle, it's trickery. The second case, when a magician does something extraordinary, even something resembling the miracles of prophets, but without any claim of prophethood. In this case, it is not a miracle because it is not accompanied or preceded by the prophet's challenge to others. First, when a phenomenon that doesn't appear to be a miracle is accompanied by a challenge, it is them as sign prophets. So they are not miracles. They are not signs of prophets. Case number three, if during the life of after the death of a prophet, a magician performs an extraordinary action similar to the Janus said to proclaim prophethood for himself and challenges others to produce something like it. In this circumstance, God will nullify this magician's claim in one of the two ways. First, God will prevent him from doing his magic by causing him to forget entirely how to work it, or will simply not let the magic take the effect. Second, God will send a group of magicians to accomplish something similar to what the former magician does, and even oppose him with a subtler or more sophisticated magic. As for case number four, a prophet uses magic as his sign and challenges others to undertake something similar. In this case, his sign of being a true prophet is that something similar will not occur by the hands of anyone other than him at the moment of his challenging them to do so. God causes the magician's inability to meet the challenge in one or two ways. First, he will make them forget how to work magic. Second, God will render his magic vain by simply not letting it happen. The final case, case number five, when a prophet uses something as his sign and others imitate them by using the same sign. Let's say a true prophet uses a magnetic stone as his sign. Then someone else takes the stone and travels to other regions and claims this as his sign in front of the people who have never seen or nor heard about it. In this case, God will nullify his claim in one of two ways. First, God will instill abundant motives in the heart of a group of people to export magnetic stones to the region, so to tell that the man is lying. Second, God will prevent the magnetic stone from working. The conclusion of this theory is that miracles are distinguished from magic because a miracle is a miracle because it meets the conditions for a miracle, not because it is by genus completely something that only God alone has power. Miracle category number one. In other words, the miraculousness is determined not only by its genus, that is the first category of miracles, but also by its modes, the second category. It is interesting that Al-Bāqillānī put so much weight on the centrality of God on the point that to him, it is legitimate enough to say that magnetic stones, talisman, and fire locks can be a sign of prophethood in the case when a prophet claims them to be his sign and others cannot produce its effect because God makes it so. As I argue, the distinction between true miracles and magic was not an end in itself for Al-Bāqillānī. I argue that he had a pragmatic agenda behind his insistence on these premises, namely to defend and support his theory of the miraculousness of the Qur'an. Al-Bāqillānī's theory of miracles, that is his definition of miracles and his categorization of miracles into two kinds, and his distinction of miracles and magic informs aspects in which he agrees and disagrees with the Bashran Mu'tazilis. In general, It is clear that the definition of miracle set out by the Mu'tazilis and adopted by Al-Bāqillānī with some modification is not only inspired by and based on the verses of the Qur'an, but also prompted by the concern for the miraculousness of the Qur'an. We remember the Hadith verses in this case. The definition is made in order to include the Qur'an as a legitimate miracle. Also, as I have mentioned, two categories of miracle are formulated to include the Qur'an as a prophetic miracle. The Qur'an is in the second category of miracles because it belongs to something that humans are able to produce to a degree. It is legitimate miracles even though the Qur'an is unlike the miracles of Moses and Jesus, which are clearly something beyond humans' power to affect. From case number 5, we can also allude Al-Bāqillānī's support to the Basharan Mu'tazilis. The Baghdadi Mu'tazilis, those who doesn't believe or those who doesn't believe in the internal superiority of the Qur'an, argues that the memorization and recitation of the Qur'an should be qualified as an opposition or mu'aradah. Abdul Jabbar disagrees with this and stated that memorization is a skill that can be learned while the real credit belongs to the originator of the text. Al-Bāqillānī illustrated this situation in case number 5. And from this case emerged a theory that the superiority of the Qur'an as a miracle is that its miraculousness is enduring. And in fact, the Qur'an's enduring miracle makes it superior in comparison to Moses and Jesus' miracles. While the Ash'aris and Basran Mu'tazilis agreed on these points outlined above, Al-Bāqillānī departs from the Mu'tazilis in 2 aspects. The first, and this is illustrated in case number 3, 4, and 5, he stressed that miracles are only things that are by genus miracles, but they are also such by virtue of their modes, how they were affected. Miracles number 2. This tells that even though Al-Bāqillānī acknowledged the internal superiority of the Qur'an, he wanted to emphasize that the miraculousness of the Qur'an lies in its supernatural origin, not in its empirical appearance. He refuted the thinking of the 2 Mu'tazili schools because they implied the participation of human power in the performance of miracles. It relates to their doctrine of secondary causality or generative process. He wants to uphold the truth claim of revelation alone, and it supports the Ash'ari's view of the Qur'an status as the Qur'an is the ultimate source of religion, the ultimate source of law. In other words, as the Qur'an's miraculousness is solely based on divine initiatives, the Qur'an is sufficient as the only foundation of religion. And this is contrary to the Mu'tazilis who placed reason alongside revelation. They held that good and evil are objective and can be discerned by human reason. Al-Bāqillānī also departs from the Mu'tazilis in his defense of prophetic miracles while simultaneously upholding the existence of magic. Defending the idea that magic has a reality corresponds to Ash'ari's theology, but as I argues, it also relates to Al-Bāqillānī's theory of i'jāzul Qur'an. Endorsing the reality of magic and saintly miracles can be the strongest proof that something is called a miracle, not simply because of its genus, but because God makes it so in as many different ways as possible, as the hypothetical cases argued earlier. Again, this idea relates closely to the concept that the Quran becomes a miracle because God makes it so, thus supporting the Ash'ari's view of the Quran status as the only source of religion. From Kitāb al-Bayān, we can infer that even though Al-Bāqillānī believes in the internal superiority of the Quran, it's not them to the extent that man and jinn cannot match it. He simply based the miraculousness of the Quran in the breaking of custom that only God can do. Through this theory, I argue that Al-Bāqillānī had tried to find a middle ground between the traditionalists, the Basran, and the Baghdadi Mu'tazilis concerning what constitutes the miraculousness of the Quran. The doctrine of Sarfah propagated by the Baghdadi Mu'tazilis doesn't correspond to Ash'ari theology because it is not logical to say that humans are incapable of producing something, i.e. a miracle, nor that they are prevented by God from producing it since the creatures do not have the ability in the first place. However, as much as the doctrine of Sarfah was refuted by Al-Bāqillānī, he used the Baghdadi Mu'tazilis notion of the role of God in the occurrence of miracles and intensified it to an absolute. On the other hand, just like Abdul Jabbar and the Basran Mu'tazilis, he acknowledged the inner superiority of the Quran above the custom of Muhammad's contemporaries to the point that they couldn't match it. However, unlike them, he didn't put the miraculousness of the Quran in the material aspect, which is not difficult for the Mu'tazilis who regard the Quran as created. Rather, it lies in its being something. Rather, the miracle, according to Al-Bāqillānī, lies simply in its being something breaking the custom of which God alone has power. Here he maintained the traditionalist doctrine that the Quran is God's speech, yet with a different nuance. Indeed, for Ash'ari theologians, the point of departure is God's will and omnipotence. In studying his position, Al-Bāqillānī was affirming one aspect of a theory and rejecting another aspect of the same theory. There are several concerns concerning Al-Bāqillānī's theory. In Ibn Taymiyyah, for example, asserts that Al-Bāqillānī contradicts his own theology in which God is allowed to do and will anything. However, in his theory of miracles and his hypothetical cases, he says that God has to do such and such in order for miracles not to fall in the hands of the liars. His theory also implies that, so basically he ascribes something, that is wajib to God, that is actually something. Magic and miracles are basically the same in its materiality. Another issue is that in this theory, it is possible to ascribe an ordinary things as a sign of prophethood as long as its performance meets of his second category of miracles. In this type, I'm not sure that Al-Bāqillānī is trying to say that the Quran is an ordinary thing. He outlines this speculative category only to intensify God's role in miracle. As for the Quran, I feel that it belongs to the second type of the second category, even though it belongs to something that creature can produce. The Quran has elements of language, letters, words, phrases that human can produce. But the uniquely excellent nature of the Quran requires an extraordinary amount of what creatures can produce. Therefore, only God can do it. This theory is in line with his theory of i'jaz that lies in nazm. Quranic nazm is something that cannot be learned. I have argued that Al-Bāqillānī's stress on God's role in the performance of miracles is to support the ultimate status of revelation in Ash'arism. It points the priority of the Quran over the human aql as the ultimate source of knowledge. If this argument is accepted to be sound, it will be interesting to connect this with his theory of i'jaz in his Kitāb al-Qur'an as argued by Rachel Friedman. She argues that the Al-Bāqillānī in the miraculousness of the Quran lies in its nazm, and it's used to express ideas and meanings in the clearest way. In other words, Kitāb al-Bayān provides an argument that the Quran is the ultimate source of revelation because it is the miracle of God. And as the source of religion, the Quran therefore has to be understandable or comprehensible. In this respect, according to Friedman, who and she reads Al-Bāqillānī's Kitāb al-i'jaz al-Qur'an in light of his work on Usul al-Fiqh Taqrib. Al-Bāqillānī indeed wants to say that even though the Quran is miraculous, it is clear and comprehensible, and in fact it is precisely in this aspect that the Quran is miraculous, not simply because of the Quran's aesthetic phenomenon. For further reflection, it will be interesting to further connect Al-Bāqillānī's theory in Kitāb al-Bayān with his theory of God's speech and the uncreatedness of the Quran, on the distinction between kalam nafsi and kalam lafzi, and with his hermeneutics or usul al-fiqh. But these are something that this presentation has not dealt with. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Mbak Lien. It was a very exciting talk and of course different from what we previous talk in which we discussed more modern thought and phenomenon, and you suddenly come up with a study on Bāqillānī of the 4th century Hijri.
And a lot of technical kalam.
Ya, genau.